episode 4. In this next video we're now going to be installing the bearings, these Timken roller bearings that you can see here. We're going to be installing these onto the shaft here. I have made a tool. This here doesn't look like much, but what I'm going to do, cut to a video and you'll see exactly how this has been made. Okay, pretty cold in the shop today, so hence the woolly hat. I'm just making this little tool here that I wanted to show you. There is a specific Harley tool out there, but one of the things about this channel is I want to show you how you can get around with having to use specific Harley Davidson tools. So it started out where basically I know that there's a tool that threads onto this with then a threaded rod that sticks up even further, and then with the accessory of some tubes and that, it allows you to press the bearing onto this shaft. The reason you don't use a press for doing it is because once this is trued up, if you was to press it, you've got the ability to be able to like press it out of shape if you like. A long time ago at a motorbike show, I think it was the Kickback, me and a group of friends, we got given these goodie bags and these were inside, and to be honest none of us really knew what they were, and it was only up until recently I figured out exactly how to use it. I was trying to find out the size of this thread here by dropping this over. It slipped perfectly over the 3/4 inch, and then on the back these are all the thread patterns here, all the pitches of threads. It was a 3/4 inch 16 UNF bolt. So a quick look on eBay, it's a little bit of tube that's internally threaded, but it fits on that thread perfectly. I found this as well. I've hollowed out the inside. If I weld that, then what I'll be able to do is slot the bearing on, screw this on, then some tubes will drop over onto the center of the race of the bearing, put a nut on top, and I'll be able to wind this down and that will force the bearing down. I know that you can buy these, but that bolt was in the box. Can't remember where it come from. So even if you had to go and buy that, what would that cost you? £5? And I think this was £3 off of eBay, a little bit of weld, and we've got a tool. Okay, so there's the finished product. As you can see, I welded the sleeve into the nut. Wasn't quite happy with the having the nut head on there. It melted into it and made it look a little bit scruffy. So I decided to machine it down in the lathe and then run a knurl on it. So basically I'll be able to grab it, but what you should see now is that screws on. So now a tube will slip down and over, sit on the centre race of the bearing. I'll get a nut to fit this, wind it down, and it'll press it on. So I think the tube's going to have to be about that long with the nut on top, and it still gives me all that area there. So yeah, I think one piece of tube that fits right over. May have to machine that down a little bit more, which is a pity because it's all nailed now. Oh, it's warm, so season on now. But yeah, that is my homemade Timken bearing press. I found this tube up in the rafters, and this fits over perfectly, but the original size it didn't fit through that, so I had to turn it down a little bit more. Now this slides through perfectly. So what the idea is, using the new bearings which I've already taken out of the pack and unwrapped, as you can see here. So I've got a bearing, a spacer which goes into the case, then you have the spacer that goes between the two bearings to get you your correct end float, then you've got another Timken bearing on the other side. In the box there's a little note that does say to you, warning, this is a matched bearing assembly. So when you take it out and that bearing is in that race and that bearing is in that race, you need to remember that they go round that way in the case as well. So assembly loop, I should definitely make sure I put some of this on now. It's that silly lid that I can never get off again. There we go. So I'm going to put some of this, actually, I don't know if it is going to make any difference or not, but look, it's like snot. I'm going to spread it all around that, and hopefully it might just aid it pushing on a little bit easier. I won't bother putting it on the bearing yet. I'm going to wait until it's on. It'll be easier to pack it in once it's on. So that's seated on there. Oh, I'm forgetting my parts. fingers and thumbs. And hopefully just check that it's all square first, it's pressing right. Yeah. So using a 30mm spanner, you should now just be able to, right, just start making contact there, have a little check. Failed, didn't it? Okay. Back to the drawing board, I guess. Oh, right, what a kerfuffle that was. When I turned the camera off, I went over to my welder to basically to repair the bolt, weld it back together, and hopefully carry on pushing this bearing on. But unfortunately, then found out my welder was broke, and I'd run out of gas, and it just seemed to be a lot of things added up over the last 2 weeks. Yeah, so I had to order some new parts because I've scrapped that that particular bearing pusher. So I ordered up some new parts, and I've made a new one, hopefully stronger, better, definitely a bit longer as well. But the idea of having a longer bolt now in the proper Harley kit, the tube that's used to push the actual bearing on, there's multiple sizes, so that for the first bearing there's a longer tube that you push the bearing right to the bottom, and then once you've put the case on and you push the other bearings on, you use shorter tubes because it doesn't have to push as far. But with one long bolt, one tube, in theory this should be able to push it in one go. So hopefully we can kind of get back to where we was. So yeah, it started to push it on a little bit, but it didn't really like it. Yes, fingers crossed for this one. So now the new one does actually screw all the way down, and I'm doing that without putting the tube on. Right, on there. That will now screw all the way down. Okay, yep, so that's all the way down now. Last time I was struggling, so on the pin that holds the crank from the jig that I made, I think if I put a set of mole grips on, then that should give me something to lever off of, basically. So get those on there nice and tight. I have no idea what metal that was that those bolts were made out of, but as soon as my welder touched it, the arc was all over the show. From the MIG welder, it was horrible, absolutely horrible to weld, and the welds looked horrible as well. So I was like, yeah, do you know what? I will machine those. I will make them look pretty. Hopefully I'll need it again. So back where we started, where we left off even, sorry. So what did I say, I've got about an inch worth of travel there. Back with the spanner, and fingers crossed this should push down. before I was filming. It's that cold outside that I have to put the heater on for a little while to warm up the shed, then turn it off whilst I'm filming because it makes too much noise. But with it just being a little wooden workshop in my back garden, it's insulated, but the temperature drops very quick. That is it. Wow. It's only gone and worked. Obviously worked out that thread just right. Take the old race off and wow. There it is. I'm pleased with that. Yeah, super pleased. It worked, and it'll go on to fight another day. So again, like I said in the last video with that frame jig, if anybody needs to push bearings on, it wasn't that difficult to make. I can't guarantee how long it will last for, but if you need to change your flywheel bearings, I've got the tool here. Drop me a message, I'll send it to you. You can use it just on the promise that you're going to send it back. I want nothing for it. I'm not selling it, I'm just loaning it to you, but you have to pay for the postage. So yeah, wow, that's taken a long time. That has taken far too long. So the next job is now we'll bring the case over. I'll get that set up, I'll move the flywheel out of the way, bring the case over, and I need to put the new inner races. The last races, I didn't film them coming out. I've got one of them here just on the bench actually. They didn't look to be in too bad a condition, if I'm honest, but as that little note said earlier on, they come as a set, so if we're changing inners, if we're changing these, you know, the new races need to go with it. They come out pretty easy. I just managed to use a centre punch with a hammer, work my way round, and they dropped out. What I have found out as well is this centre ring that come with the kit, I don't know if you remember me saying that it needs to be positioned in a certain orientation so that the oil hole lines up in this gap here. There is a tool for changing these. I know I repeat myself, there's a specialist Harley Davidson tool, and they say that if you haven't got it, do not even attempt to remove it, because these edges are sharp, and what will happen is as it comes in and out of the recess where it sits, because it sits between the two, so basically it would end up in the case between the two races like so. But trying to get this out will score the inside of the case where this race needs to be sitting. So the one in there is fine. I've cleaned it out, I've had it in the parts washer, I've gone to town on it, so that I will not be using because the one in there is perfectly adequate. So yeah, let's push the new inner races into the case. Then we start needing to check the end flow, and we do that with these spacers. Now this one here, this is the original spacer that come out of it. It could even end up being the one that goes back into it because they come in multiple thicknesses, and these will sit just between the bearings there. So if I get that old inner race, if we was to imagine this is a full bearing, what happens is that goes in, the other bearing will come down and press on it. It will then create end flow in the flywheel. That end flow is so that once the engine warms up and things expand and things like that, basically there is that tolerance for things to be able to expand and contract as well. So unfortunately it's a bit of hit and miss of finding out which one of these goes in. So I've got some calipers, got some gauges to be able to measure the thicknesses, but it is just going to be put one in, measure how much end float we've got, and then from there we should be able to then take it apart and then put the correct one in with a little bit of an equation. So yeah, cool. Like I say, let's clear this out of the way, let's get the races in, and then we'll get this pushed in. Wicked. Okay, so we've got the case here, the first half of the case, what the flywheel actually gets pressed into. Now I keep harping on about this washer that goes in the middle, so I'd actually want to show it in place. So if I go over to the side camera here, you can see it, it's already in there and it can spin around quite freely. In the top of the case here, this is the oil feed into that bearing. So that's what we're saying about having that opening where in line with the oil feed, because hopefully if I tilt that back, at some point you are going to see a hole up in there, and that is where the oil drains through the bearing. There's another opening here because on the face on the inside is where oil then drains back through again, and I'll be able to show you that once the race goes in. But yeah, hopefully you can see that okay. Let's bring it a bit central. No special tools for this. I am just going to use a copper mallet with the old race possibly and just drive it back in. Like I say, just a copper mallet, go gently until it gets a little bit of purchase there, and it should drive home nicely. Yep. Making sure I was getting the right one then, right racing. That's the inside, this is the inside of the engine, that's the primary side, so yeah. Oops. Just one last check to make sure that opening is in the right place, because once these faces come down, once these inner races get down onto it, it's going to start pinching it in place. So now I'm going to use the old race. Hear that noise? Just hear the way that changed then, that tone? That is a clear indication that it has bottomed out on that ring. Yep. Just get my little brush. That is magic. Flip it over and do the other side. Let's drive this one back in. Not sure how I'm going to get it that last little way because that's now flush. Let's see what we have. Okay, got this in my metal bin. Oh wow. Go for a bigger hammer, not having to rely on the copper face anymore because it is just now going down inside. So there we go, there's another tool. And there we have it. Both races are now inside. That central ring has stayed in position. The races are in. There's that bottom race that I was on about. So this is the drain. This here is the drain back in. And if we flick to this side, you can see that that's where it drains through. Wow. Okay, cool. So the next job now, we can get rid of these. These are old. keep old bearings laying around, because you end up worrying what they're for when you find them at a later date. So where's all those bits? Oh look, one of those things fell out that's meant to help to put the engine together. Cool. Now we need to put the case actually onto the engine. Right, let's get everything back in again. Okay, so we've got the flywheel back in play now. I've also got all the spacers lined up here. These are the ones that I've purchased. So I've got a 0.102, 0.102, 0.104, 105, 106, 108. I've measured the original one that was inside it, and it's coming out at about 0.010. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go with the one that was in it originally, the biggest one. And the reason I'm going to do that is because when I measure the end float, I imagine it's going to give me a large reading on the end float. But from that reading, I'll then be able to work back with the maths and get it within the tolerance that I need. So I think it says 0.001 to 0.005. So if I put this in and I'm getting, say for argument's sake, if I'm getting 0.010, so then I know I'm 5 over. So I can drop down to the 0.105, put that in, which is the smaller one, and that will take up that tolerance and bring me back in spec. It'll take me to the higher end of the spec. So even if I went to the 104 or even down to the 102, I would still be within spec. So I've got quite a bit to play with. So yeah, but that's just all hoping that that's the way it goes. So yeah, the spacer is what goes on next. That will end up between the two bearings. So before I do that, because you never know, we could put it on and it could end up within spec. So we have to build this up like it is going together. So now I've figured out how the bloody lid works. We can fill the bearing up with lubricant. Like I said, this is just what's gonna help it on that initial start up. So put it around the top to start with, a few rotations, and you can see it start to work its way down into that bearing housing. A little bit around the edge. Never going to hurt, is it? It's just going to force it in. Ugh. Stuff is like snot. Okay, cool. So you can see I've positioned this flywheel with a pin facing towards you and the conrods separated as well. And you do that for a reason, because when you actually offer up the case, you need to make sure that as you drop it over, line it up on the bearing, that your conrods actually end up in the openings of where the barrels should be. So what should happen now is this bearing, let me coat it with some lubricant. Gets pushed in, that'll push it into the bearings, and then I'll also be able to backfill it as well. Right, that's now dropped in, but can't go all the way in, so we're back to using this tool. The only downside is I've not got anything to sort of grab hold of and be able to yank it up nice and tight. Okay, cool. When I made this originally, you can see that there's some marks and that up here. unfortunately the nut got cross-threaded within this top section, so you can see there's some marks on there where I have to grab it with the mole grips and work it off. And then fortunately, with a good thread file, I was actually able to get it to move up and down quite freely, except through that top section there. So that's why you see me just wind the bolt up and put the tube on that way. Anyway, that's enough of that. So yeah, again, just double check, make sure everything's lined up properly. That inner race looks to be lined up with the inner race of that. We are ready to push. Just don't know what I'm going to hold on to. I wonder if I can, if I'm not going to use that, I wonder if I can put mole grips up this high. Slow. A bit nerve-wracking. You know, you're thinking, oh, I hope it's alright. I hope I'm not going to be catching a conrod, or I don't know what else could possibly go wrong. Looks like the whole engine's going for a little bit of a run before I was even together. Loose a little bit there. Okay, as I push onto that to try and undo it, all I'm doing is undoing the nut, and that is not down all the way. Okay. Okay, so it took me a long time to figure out that if I come to the end of my workbench where I've got the chock that would hold my front wheel once I've got the bike up here, that I could get that brake disc that I've made the flywheel mount out of, I could get the widest part of that into the chock, crank it up nice and tight, and hopefully, fingers crossed, I can now actually get some purchase and finally get this nut wound all the way down. So, in theory, it seems to be working. We can now just run it down. It wasn't that far off at all, because that is now, that's bottomed out. Okay, all we have to do now is just measure it, and as long as it's in tolerance, then we haven't got to press it back out again. But if it's not in tolerance, press the bearings out. Yeah, it's worked perfectly. Yeah, we press the bearings out and change that spacer in between. Now to measure the end play, what I'll be using is one of the dial indicators that I had for when I was truing the flywheel up, but I need it to be able to kind of sort of sit around here somewhere and take advantage of the magnetic base, but unfortunately, because of the type of metal this is, these cases aren't magnetic. So I'm going to take a strip of metal here, drill 2 holes in it that mount up with these case holes, these case bolts here, bolt that down. This will then go on top, probably sort of around this sort of way. Turn the magnet on, which will make it stick to it. Bolt that down. That'll be my point. Rotate the dial round, get it lined up on the top there, and then it would just be lift up the engine and see what the end plate is. So yeah, then we go drill these holes, get this bolted down, and I'll show you exactly what I was on about. Right, so with those holes now dug, bloody hell, what am I thinking? Those holes now drilled. I've not been digging no fucking holes. Yeah, it's fine. Turn the magnet on. So now we have the magnet set up on the strip that we've got bolted across. The magnet's turned on with the dial indicator pointing on the very top of the output shaft there. Now, in the book, which I have here, actually, before I do go any further, let's talk a little bit about this, because originally I said that I had that big folder saying that it was the font of all knowledge, and I quickly found out that it wasn't. I actually managed to get the proper service manual for the 1991 model Harley Davidson, so this is what I've been following now. And if we turn it over, where is it? On this page here somewhere, it tells us, here we go, we need 0.001 to 0.005 of end plate. So what you should be able to, I don't even know if the camera is going to be able to zoom in enough, but I've got it set up. The dial indicator is pretty much pointing, it's just below the 1. So from this angle here that I can see, it's just a gnat's cock below the 1. As I lift it and take the weight of the engine, just there, it is just below the 2. So what that tells me is that we have 0.002 thou of end play within that flywheel. So we've been quite lucky, we've hit it straight off. That means the flywheel's now in the engine. I don't have to press it back out or anything, it's in there. I guess that's it. We'll go on to the next episode. Yeah, we're next episode where we will offer up the other side of the case and get this thing closed up and start getting some other components bolted onto it, so it looks even more like an engine. But it's definitely a good position to be in. We haven't got to worry about trying to fit any other the bearings on the inside there, so we can now just crack on with the rest of the build. I'm absolutely chuffed with that. Really pleased with the tools and that I've made to help me get this far. Yeah, another quick thing, I just want to thank everyone that has subscribed so far. Also, you know, all the support that I'm getting, messages from people about different bits and pieces on the Sportster forums and things like that as well. I appreciate all the love that I'm getting there. Yeah, so keep subscribing. If you're new to the channel, just down the bottom, hit like, subscribe, and press that little bell, and that'll notify you as I upload videos. I try to do them about every 4 weeks, but it all depends on basically tools, parts, and my actual time getting out here as well. But seeing this bit come together, this is a huge thing. So the case is coming together next time. It's going to be awesome, absolutely awesome. So yeah, till next time, adios.